some of you may kind of like sneer at it, but they are actually the best-selling books, and they sell in the tens of thousands. And actually, if you add, because the True Singapore Ghost Stories have been running as a long series for a long, long time, each one would sell anything like 30 to 40,000. So if you have a series of 12 books or 15 books, you do the math, right? So in terms of absolute numbers, that probably is in a league of its own.
It's the ghost story.
Yeah, and then you have perhaps something which is, there's a bit of a value judgment here, a bit more respectable perhaps, which is, for example, something like children's literature, right? Adeline Fu would then be the next league of writers who was probably selling maybe up to 100,000, yeah? After 4 books maybe, something like that. So each one she sells about 20,000, 30,000, so she may be 80 to 100,000. And children's books, so good, it's a series, a young kid called Amos, yes, Amos, yes, that's the name of the kid. And then you have novels in Singapore, so that would be Simon Tay, Claire Tam, these people who write fiction, let's not say novels, fiction. And that would be maybe 2,000-3,000 copies. That would give you a sense of the readership. And then poetry gets anything up to 1,000. Quite often it's less than 1,000. So, a fairly well-known poet may only, get 800 copies or 600 copies. This is quite common. But having said that, there's a lot of poetry. A lot of people are putting out poetry. Partly because the National Arts Council, WorkHab again, actually gives out a publishing grant. And because we know that most arts councils across the world support poetry, because poetry tends to be less commercially sustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
So more need.
Yeah, so there's no more need, and because of that grant that we give, which kind of covers maybe 20-30% of the cost of getting the book out, publishers find it worth their while to get the books out. So the challenge for us is getting the book out is one thing, so it sits in books actually, or it sits in Kinokuniya, great, but is anyone reading them? From the poet's perspective, and now I'm not wearing the writer's hat anymore, I'm wearing my bureaucrat hat, which is, okay, great, we have now done the supply, okay, we've done the upstream stuff. How do we do the downstream stuff? How do we get these people to read? They're not going to read poetry, but maybe they might, but
we'll just make them read.
Yeah.
They can leave here. Is that a good idea? No, to read one book of poetry.
Yeah, so you should do that. Support your local writers. But practically speaking, from a work point of view, one of the things we do, which I think has got another horrible bureaucrat phrase, be warned, that has a multiplier effect, is we work with people like the ministry, right? So once we work with the ministry and they agree that this collection of Singapore poetry can be a good reading material for lower secondary students, then let's co-commission this book, put it as a recommended supplementary text, which we have done for poetry. The anthology is called And Words. And then, because I lamented about growing up with daffodils and Famous Five and Enid Blyton and cucumber sandwiches, I didn't have a cucumber sandwich probably till I was about 25. But these kids, I grew up reading this stuff. So to address that, then we said, okay, why don't we see whether we can get a collection of short stories going, which is entirely authored by Singapore writers, and that is, the volume of work is called Telltale, and it's actually an O-level syllabus, so there are actually kids, the secondary school kids that are doing it as an O-level syllabus. So it has got a lot of benefits. I mean, from a publishing point of view, it means that you're guaranteed a certain number of copies, okay, which is good, so it makes it more sustainable. But from a pure readership point of view, from the higher goals, you're getting a bunch of young people who are being, trained, who are being, with the guidance of the teacher, to read works which are authored by the best Singapore authors. I mean, I always tell the curriculum people, just because we champion Singapore writers doesn't mean that every Singapore writer is good, that anything that anyone produces from here is worthy of being in the curriculum. I got to keep reassuring them, because they keep thinking that I want everything to be Singapore literature. Of course not. Yeah. But I think that was a kind of a small milestone for us, because I think that was the first time, at least with the English literature curriculum people, we were able to get Singapore, a new work, a co-commission of a collection of anthology of short stories. Yeah, so that was quite heartening for us. Yeah.
Sounds like ghost poetry would be the way to go.
Ghost poetry, yeah. Okay. That's a good idea. If I publish out, we shall credit you. Yeah, True Singapore Ghost Poems.
Okay, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Anybody have any questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Yep.
My personal experience with reading like Singaporean poetry when I was in school,
Oh, you did it in school?
like yeah, probably then was, I don't know, it kind of puts me off. My personal opinion.
Go on. Yeah, why? Was it?
Because so much of it is about like it's. I feel like my personal opinion is that I think Singaporean poetry or Singaporean works in general, right? At least the ones that I read in school, I don't know about the latest cutting edge stuff. It's pretty self-indulgent in its own Singaporeanness. It's like, hey why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Said Pa as
Yeah.
he walks across the kitchen. You know that kind of thing?
Yeah. So there's a kind of exoticizing of the
I don't want to read that, but that's what I'm supplied with. So I'm wondering if is there any like, because my personal opinion, value judgment again, is that
Yes.
these are functionally bourgeois, right? Sitting in their own cultures, like like with 8 A level A's or something like that, just typing stuff, and then they okay, yeah. They, on what level can you really relate to something like the topics that they're trying to master? So actually, I was quite happy with there's a steampunk anthology coming out. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that was something I was quite happy with. But my personal opinion is that is there an active role by bureaucrats such as yourself say, there must be Singaporeanness in our poems. Is there?
Quite a few things there that you said. Okay, let me respond this way. First, it depends on what. As a teacher, I've also taught. I really taught for a while, and I have a lot of teacher friends. I would say, assuming it wasn't in the curriculum, the teacher chose a couple of texts. Perhaps she didn't choose the text carefully. That's the first point. Because I think there is a fair diversity of writing. I can give you a whole bunch of names. Granted, some of it is set in the void deck, and it's about HDB heartlands. But there's a lot of stuff that's beyond Singapore. It's about Singaporeans traveling abroad. It's about historical fiction, not necessarily of Singapore. We actually do have science fiction even before the steampunk. There is actually even Singapore published science fiction. But it depends on what the teacher chooses. So I'll put that as a first consideration. Secondly, what's the contrast is my daffodil argument. If it's done well, I actually believe that writing which is anchored in an experience that you are familiar with actually has a higher potential of giving you the aha moment. That would be my take. You may not agree. Okay, and the third point is whether we, as a bureaucrat, actually I don't quite like the word bureaucrat, say it mockingly. But as a government agency, National Arts Council is a government agency, and I work in the Tourism Board, which is also a government agency. Okay, as a government servant,
Civil servant.
Actually, strictly speaking, it's not civil servant, but would refer to the category of people that work in the ministries, wearing the stat board. So what kind of like second-class citizens. Yeah, we don't call ourselves civil servants, so I think we can be less civil, not so civil servants or servile government servants. No, not consciously. We do. Okay, I must qualify that we actually do say for content that we support. For example, we do have schemes where we support writers to go in their little cubby hole and write, for 6 months, and we give them actually an allowance. Many arts councils in the world do that. I always tell people this, that J.K. Rowling had a grant from the Scottish Arts Council that allowed her to have the luxury of not worrying about work for a while, right? When she typed out her Harry Potter first one, only for the first one, right? At some cafe in Edinburgh. So similarly, we have a similar scheme like that. But we actually do say that we would prefer, I can't remember the exact wording, we say that preference would be given to works that are anchored in Asian or Singaporean experience. We do say that. But having said that, as a team that, together with my team, we really try to make it as broad as possible. But I do feel that I would like to see good writing that is about where we live in. I mean, if you think about it, the best writings Jane Austen wrote about the world she was in, and so did the best Irish writers or the best Australian writers or the best Chinese writers. And it's not that there's no space for fantasy, By the way, Garth Nix is in town as part of my, Garth Nix talk about fantasy. Yes, he's got a talk tonight at the Arts House.